Thank you so much. This is such a pleasure to be here. The talk is Show Me the Money. And for those who like movies, this comes from a Tom Cruise movie where he's a sports agent. And anyway, there's no pictures of Tom Cruise in the presentation. As we get started, the mandatory about me talk. First of all, I absolutely want to thank Leslie and everyone who's responsible for running this conference. I absolutely love it. It's the phenomenal way to spend the time and support the community. I also would like to thank the audience, and I would like to thank my family. You'll get to it in a second, in a little bit. A little bit about me. I am currently an industry analyst, and we'll talk about industry analysts in a little bit. Before that, though, I spent the majority of my career in business-to-business vendors, uh, roles in sales engineering, professional services, security architecture, etc., and customer support. And the best way to describe the gray hair and whatnot is, yes, for those who know the movies, is I was there, Gandalf. I was there 3,000 years ago. That's how I feel about I've been around this industry for a long time. A couple of disclaimers. This is not investment or tax advice for anything. Uh, I This is not also an endorsement of any vendor. And yes, this is a high level presentation. And if some of those topics sometimes veer into politics for a little bit, I do apologize. I am of the opinion that any conversation on money, there's an element of politics underneath. I'll try to keep that as minimal as possible. As we discuss our time together, as it's been mentioned, what our agenda is going to look like today, there's two sides to the conversation. I'll discuss the cybersecurity industry a little bit, and I'll discuss personal finance. The motivation for this is that when I was early in my career, very, very late, in my early 20s, etc., these are the kinds of things that I wish I knew. It's the kind of stuff you learn over time. And some of these, ultimately, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help you become a better consumer of security products and services, a better investor, and hopefully I'm hoping that you'll have a great career ahead of yourself. With that in mind, let's quickly get started. Cybersecurity industry. There's a paper called "A Market for Silver Bullets," a very obscure paper that I really like. Describes some of the behaviors in the industry, but that's how I think about our industry as a market for silver bullets. And you may have seen some of these slides. This comes from Optiv, and it describes every vendor or that they are able to work with. And as you can see, it's a lot. There's another famous slide when you think about the cybersecurity industry, which is this logo, this chart from Momentum Cyber. They are an investment advisor and venture capitalists themselves, and they famously put out some really nice material. This is just their view of the industry. Every one of these logos is a vendor trying to interact with their customers. Let's look into what that interaction looks like. That is, like I said, a very simplified description of the industry. On one hand, we have you. You're trying to get something done. You're trying to buy a product or buy a service for something. There's a quote from marketing that customers don't or consumers don't want to buy a drill; they want to buy a hole in their wall, right? So you're trying to fulfill your mission, whatever that is. On the other side of the table, there's the vendor. That vendor possibly creates or operates a product or service that is aimed to support that business. Theoretically, that's as simple as it gets. How that vendor is going to interact with you is primarily at first through marketing and sales. So that's one of the areas we're going to look into, which is these are functions that are supposed to help facilitate the exchange of goods. There's a lot more. There may be professional services involved, which as it says here, it's usually to help you implement or post-sales implement what you're going to do, which itself is different than managed services, which in the context of what we're discussing here is we'll take that solution and we'll run it for you in an ongoing basis. The other two elements that I think are important distinguishing is one, what's customer support, which is you're trying to get assistance with running the product that you have, and you're trying to, the alternative to that, sometimes mentioned, is customer success, which is more about helping you along your journey. This is a very simple description. The other two elements I want to bring up are the channel, and we'll get into channel into a little bit. And then just understand that they help you bridge the gap, so they help the vendor scale and so on. And investors. Investors will help you, will help provide funding for creating that service. One of the things I want to talk about, so the first one I want to talk about is marketing. What does marketing actually do? Marketing is responsible for defining and running the customer journey. So how do you as a consumer interact with that vendor's brand and those vendors' products? You should understand, I mean, marketing is a discipline on its own right. There's multiple teams involved. And one of the things that that marketing thinks a lot about is at what stage on the journey are you on, right? And they talk about the notion of a marketing funnel, as you see here. At the first moment, you might have an awareness of the brand. Then at some point, you might be considering that product. Are you actually going to use it? Maybe if you actually buy it, it's a conversion, and then they are looking for, are you a loyal customer? Are you going to be able to, are you willing to advocate for them? So marketing is an entire discipline. And I bring this up here because everything that we see, that we interact with online, all the webinars, all the downloads that we do, all the conference participation, the swag at conferences, everything is being driven as a way of helping you along that path and along the ways of generating leads and potentially qualifying those leads. This is why we answer so many questions, right? Another point that's worth mentioning is that marketing itself is really interested in measuring their own influence on revenue. If somebody buys $10 million worth of product down the line, marketing wants to know, did they help with that? Or was that just something direct from sales? So that's marketing. Sales, on the other hand, and I'm going to talk mostly about sales-led business to business here, not business to consumer. Sales, they're obviously their main concern is they're concerned with growing revenue and growing revenue in a predictable manner. What ends up happening here is that sales is concerned with, okay, we're going to have a pipeline of deals that may be in different stages, right? And we're going to be able to forecast how big those deals are going to be so that our company can show the proper return to our own investors, right? So keep that in mind. One of the things that people don't often grasp is that there are an incredibly different number of roles within sales. It's not just one salesperson. At the high level, you have business development representatives. They are the ones responsible for that early interaction. Hey, do you want to schedule 15 minutes with us? Right. Sometimes some of the spam that we get is from business development teams just trying to move the leads they got from marketing through that pipeline. At some point, there may be inside sales reps. Inside sales reps are those who may sell just over the phone. Hey, do you want to buy extra licenses for whatever product? There's multiple levels of account executives. Those are the ones who are going to be interacting possibly with named accounts. If they're selling to larger accounts, they may be able to sell to on a geographical region. I'm based in Ontario, Canada. Okay, you are the rep for Ontario, or you are the rep for Quebec, or what have you. There are, in many cases, especially for larger vendors, there's overlays. They sell specific products within the broader portfolio. I'm a former sales, I work in sales engineering. I don't call myself an engineer. I'm former in sales engineering, help support that sales. And then there's end levels of sales management along the way. One of the things you should be aware of is that sales has a number of methodologies that get applied. The company usually picks one and runs with it. A vendor picks one and runs with it. As an example of that, why are we asked so many questions as consumers, right? Some of you may have heard the acronym MEDIC, right? This stands for metrics, economic buyer, decision criteria, decision process, identify the pain, and champion. This is what sales management expects the account reps to be able to quantify about every account that they're involved in, so that they know, how well do we know this account? Are we going to actually win this deal? Is this deal even real, right? The other thing that you should be aware of is that the cost of sales matters. If you're going to buy if you have a relatively small user base and you're going to buy something, vendors will treat you differently. They may just do a demo for you. And you know what? It's not, the size of the deal is not enough to justify the cost of running a POC, a proof of concept, or running a pilot. The cost of the size of the deal is also going to determine how does the deal process work. If they are going to be an RFI, a request for information, followed by a request for proposal, followed by potentially a request for quotation. So this is, all these dynamics play a part in interacting with sales. The other thing you should know is that sales itself has a lot of internal nuances around commissions, for example. If there are two sales teams involved, one is a geographic team covering Canada, where the customer is testing the product, but the purchase is going to come from head office in New York or in somewhere in the US. Okay, how do we arrange commissions? Who gets quota retirement and so on? There is a lot that goes on in terms of sales that's interesting for us to understand as we interact with sales teams. So those are just a couple of the areas. The other things I think are important mentioning is that sales itself is changing, right? The challenge of what's referred to as go-to-market. Up until now, what I just described is what's usually described as sales-led growth. The sales team goes out and sells. It's changing, especially for digital products and services. There's a notion of product-led growth. It's the idea that you're going to try out the product and you like it and you start small, and then at some time it keeps growing within your organization. A lot of companies are moving to what's called a hybrid model, where they may use product-led growth for smaller accounts, but they will go for sales-led growth for once it crosses a certain threshold. The other thing that's definitely affecting sales is the role of cloud. Here we have both the fact that a lot of cloud providers have built-in security, which diminishes the white space for a vendor. We can get into that conversation later if need be, but also that you can buy directly through a marketplace. Similar to a product-led growth scenario, here you are buying whatever licenses you need for a cloud environment just off of the cloud, marketplace itself. I do want to touch briefly on channel. Again, this is learnings for an early professional. The idea that the channel is made up of these multiple companies that are responsible for support, for mediating the interaction between you and ultimately the vendor. Many moving pieces. There are distributors. And some of this is more for hardware goods, for example, but you have distributors. Distributors will actually buy, they are the ones who buy the actual product from the vendor. They pay the vendor and the vendor is done, and then they resell that through their distribution channel to their resellers, which are usually who have more of a local touch in talking to you. Then those resellers themselves might help you implement you. If not, you might use consultancies, or you might use system integrators, and so on. Just like in sales, please understand that there are dynamics happening in the channel too. If you have two resellers, if you have a relationship with two resellers, they both want to sell you the product. Well, which one gets to do it? That's an entire discussion in itself. So that is sales, that is marketing. I wanted to touch briefly on industry tracking, and that's where my role as an industry analyst comes in. Industry analysts, we work both with end user organizations and with vendors, trying to answer questions around buying trends, trying to answer questions around what is being offered, trying to answer questions around how big is a market getting, and so on and so forth, trying to follow specific acquisitions that may or may not have happened. When there's hundreds of analyst firms in the world, this chart here illustrates that some of those firms, they are more used to working primarily with end user organizations. Others are more familiar with working primarily helping the vendors, and some work on both. One thing I want to talk about is that how I, as an analyst, look at the industry. I like to separate us in terms of 4 types of vendors. I'll get to that in the next slide. And answer the thing about how our industry, what our industry looks like. The way I look at our industry is that there are security vendors. These are organizations where the majority of their portfolio or their revenue comes from security products. And I'm doing like this small, medium, large, and very large. You may recognize some of the names here. The portfolio for these companies usually grows the larger they get. So these are security vendors. There's also a significant number of vendors who are technology vendors by their own right. They happen to have a security product or a security portfolio as well. Again, not endorsing anybody, but Cisco and Microsoft are good examples of those. They have significant revenue outside of security, but they have significant revenue in security as well. That's different than a Palo Alto Networks, for example, where most of their revenue is security centric. You also have companies which we call tech self, which are companies that have technology offerings that have a technology portfolio, and you can buy security for themselves. And I like to use Salesforce and AWS as perfect examples of that, right? And then non-security companies. So very, very high level look at what the industry looks like. As analysts, we like to cover industry trends. So a quick glance at what trends we're following in 2023. Vendor consolidation is a big thing for sure. We are witnessing the long-term rise of security engineering, which I find fascinating. Within security organizations, that means we are moving towards more evidence-based security. We're moving towards more automation and orchestration. Within engineering itself, some of them were now moving the responsibility for security for a product into the engineering organization, usually under the guise of product security. Cyber risk quantification is a major trend that's seeing traction, particularly as it relates to insurance. Cloud, of course, has been all over the place. And this being analysts love their acronyms, so XDR and SASE are things that are very, very present right now too. Moving on, so we talked about trends, we talked about the market. I wanted to give you just a peek into venture capital, because venture capital is one of those, it's important for you to understand when you work with startups primarily. I wanted to give you a glimpse into something. What is venture capital and how does it actually work? A venture capital firm will have an idea. Hey, we want to invest in cybersecurity companies that have cyber in their name. I'm just making it up. They will create a fund. And they say, okay, you know what? This fund is going to fund cybersecurity companies that have cyber in their name. How are we going to get money for that fund? They will go to their limited partners. These are the larger investors. These are the endowment funds, university endowments, retirement funds, etc. Large organizations that are looking for a better return on their money. And why are they doing this? Because they have their own obligations. And not to get to go too much into macroeconomics, we do live in an environment where, depending on the interest rates, they need that growth to support their own obligations. Well, venture capital is potentially going to give us better returns. We'll go ahead and put some money into that fund. At that point in time, what is going to happen is that the fund is going to be funded, and then the venture capital firm is going to start talking to different companies that may fit that criteria. How are they going to analyze whether they want to invest in that fund is specific to each venture capital firm, and there are hundreds of them. But typically, they will investigate who the team is. Is this the right timing for that investment? What does that particular market they're trying to get into looks like? How is their product? Is it a good product? Does it address the problem? How are they choosing their go-to-market? What kind of customer? How well do they understand the customer pain? And assuming the startup passes through this and they accept the terms and so on, then they may be funded. At some point in time, the VC may start a separate fund. And then again, go through the same thing, go to limited partners, get the investment and so on, and invest in other startups. The point I wanted to make here is two things. First of all, it's a multi-year process, right? From when the venture capital fund is raising money for their funds to when they are investing in companies to waiting for the exit when that company is sold or whatnot, so that they can pass the proceeds back to those limited partners. There is a lot we can talk about venture capital, but I just wanted to give you a sense. It's not just, hey, I'm going to give money to some startup. There's a complex ecosystem around it. To wrap up this part of our conversation, I want to give you some general advice. First of all, is I like the idea of trying to help you become a better informed buyer. I say be nice to sales, but not a pushover. I don't like getting spam emails either. And Andy Ellis is a former CISO of Akamai and a good friend. He has a phenomenal FAQ. You have the link there. It's an email he sends to vendors saying, "Hey, listen, I understand this. Don't involve me." It's better than just ignoring them. Tons of stuff on marketing and startups, and Wild Ventures, Momentum Cyber, ForgePoint. These are all famous famous venture capital firms. You can get a lot from conferences as well. The RSA conference is coming up, the Black Hat conferences as well. One disclaimer: the company I work for now, we are part of the same company that owns Black Hat. So yes, I'm talking about theoretically something that my firm offers, but the Black Hat conferences is also a place. On sales engineering, there's a phenomenal book called Mastering Technical Sales, which I highly recommend. And if you want to glean into what the life of an SE is like, Amy Arnold, she goes by Amy Engineer on social media. She's phenomenal. She just did an interview a couple of weeks ago that I wanted to call out here. If you're interested in venture capital, lots of good books around. Secrets of Sand Hill Road is particularly nice. And and Will Lynn is another good personal friend. He's coming out with a VC Field Guide, which should be out by mid-April. Andy Ellis, again, he has a very interesting book on leadership that is, I said, no endorsements. I will endorse Andy and Will for the stuff that they do. If you're interested in more about the industry, there are some very, very good newsletters. Richard Steenan is a former analyst. He tracks the industry phenomenally well, and I think he has about 3,500 companies, give or take. Ross Haley-Luke, sorry for the spelling, he's done some phenomenal work on the business of security. His newsletter is really interesting, and both Mike and Tyler have newsletters too. I apologize for running at a quick pace, but a lot to cover. So this is the business side of things. Let's look at the personal finance side of things. Again, remember, you are these are my learnings, things I wish I had known when in my early 20s, kind of thing. The basics we talk about more, but we don't. Another disclaimer: this is not financial advice. You will hear the words caveat emptor, buyer beware, all over the place. This has worked for me and my temperament, right? Hoping it helps you, but your mileage may vary. Regulations change a lot by geographies. I'm based in Canada. I will touch on what I know about US, but again, this is not tax advice. And if there is any politics around, I do apologize. One of the things we rarely talk about is our mistakes. And trust me, I've done my share. I've tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars over my career. I fell for scams, right? If you ever go to Disney World, don't believe the pre-Disney World tickets. High pressure sales abound, and I fell for them hard. So understand scams and high pressure sales. I spent way too much money on things that didn't match my actual lifestyle. I've spent on club memberships that even now, 30 years later, I probably still wouldn't buy. Stuff like that. So just be very careful about your spending. I've lost in investments because of carelessness. There's an express. If you ever get into investments, you'll understand the notion of falling knives. An investment strategy that may work really, really well if you are paying attention to that investment over time. Well, it may not work so well if you happen to take your eye off the ball. I took my eye off the ball, and yes, lost some money on this too. The one that still hurts to this day is that I lost free money right? Because again of oversight. Dura lex sed lex. It's a harsh law, but it's the law. And this was when I lost on options because I didn't check the expiry of those options. So the world is very, very harsh. So pay attention to that. And this is one of those that still hurts me to this day. And I remember being very, 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 very upset about it. This was not a small amount of money, and I was really, really, really upset. And my son, he was much younger then, and he looks at me and he comes and hugs me, and oh my goodness, made that put things in context, right? So when I say thank you to my family, is that this kind of journey involves them in many, many, many ways. What I wanted to share with you is that a few learnings about personal finance, and you can't discuss personal finance without discussing your career. I've read a couple of books over the years that I really, really recommend. The first one is the personal MBA, right? And the lesson I got from the personal MBA is that you are a business. You should treat your career as a business. And every successful business provides something of value that people want or need at the price they're willing to pay, that delivers on what they expect, and that makes money, right? And the terms that he uses throughout the book are value creation. So how do you define what you're going to do? Customer demand, or the marketing side. Remember, we saw marketing earlier, followed by how do you do the transaction? In other words, how do you actually sell yourself? And you deliver on that value, and you make a profit, right? So I know some of this sounds like motherhood and apple pie, but again, early lessons early on. This helps you. I think this was instrumental to teaching you to own your career, right? Here you are learning about different techniques and different things at the conference. This is awesome. You keep working on your career. The second one is The Millionaire Next Door. And from there, I learned that your lifestyle matters a lot. This was from Stanley and Danko in 1995. I read it just when it came out, and it did probably change my life more than anything else. And it's the view that the true the true millionaires are not the ones flying around, or the majority of millionaires are not the ones flying around jets and partying in Monaco or anything like that, but they are much more low key, self-made. Usually they have their own businesses, living well below their means, right? And they are focused on investing and saving. They are focused on a long-time outlook. They don't buy the flashy cars. They don't buy the expensive watches unless they want to, unless that's your thing. So again, from a personal finance lesson, your lifestyle matters a whole lot, right? You get to the point where you want to. This is one of those areas where you get to the point where you really need to develop that expensive lifestyle? Think about it, please. So that's the second book, and then the third one, a little bit more recent, is So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. Cal Newport, he is now a YouTuber, writer, etc., but he's a professor at Georgetown, I believe, and he teaches computer science, but he has an entire field of study around study habits, around deep work, around productivity, and so on. He came with this particular book comes with the advice of don't follow your passion. And he argues about what you really want to do is you want to work on your skills, have a mindset where you have enough knowledge about what you do to determine your own career. So career satisfaction via self-determination. Switching to, hopefully all of this gets you enough funds. The way that you're going the way you're going to fund your investment is primarily to what you earn through your career. So it's important to have a decent career. Switching to investments themselves, I would like people to understand that investments are a long-term focused opportunity, and you absolutely must understand what it is that you're going to get into. You have to understand, if there's one concept I want you to get from this, is the notion of understanding risk and reward. And cybersecurity professionals, we do understand risk management. So theoretically, it's not too much of a stretch for us. If you're early in your career and you're thinking about what do I do about my retirement money, you know what? That's fine. I can think about it potentially longer term. I might be okay with a riskier investment. Nothing is guaranteed in life, right? Except death and taxes, they say, right? Well, early in your career, you might be okay with a higher level of risk, depending on where that money goes. If it's for your retirement money, great. If it's for a mortgage down payment that you're going to do or a significant purchase, yeah, that's more short-term thinking, or it is short-term. So you should be able to accept lower levels of return because you really can't lose that money at that point. Later in your career, even if you have retirement money, you start reducing that. You start reducing your tolerance for risk, so that converting to something you can use it in your later years. The other thing that took me a while to learn is this difference between active and passive investments. Active investments is the one we see, hey, I'm buying stocks, I'm buying Apple, I'm buying Tesla, I'm selling Tesla, or I'm trading options, or what have you. You're analyzing transactions in detail, you are analyzing deals in detail, you're making transactions. The challenge here is that you should understand you're really up against professionals on the other side of the equation, right? The alternative is usually called passive investing. It's the notion of you're going to concentrate on, I'm not going to actively get involved in my investment. I'm going to buy funds, and we can get into those if need be, that just track the high level market returns, right? And so if the market return is going to be 20% over the next 2 years, you will get 19.5 because 20% minus a little bit of management fee. Whereas if you're an active investor, for that same 20% return, over that same 20% return, you might make 40%, you might make 60%. But realistically, after you factor in the transactions involved and the type of deals you're probably betting against, it's much more likely you will get less than that. Again, this is not investment advice. Just understand the notion of understand the notion of active and passive. And then I understand that diversification between different asset classes is a risk reduction approach. You may have heard of asset classes. What are they? So the way that I present this, and again, high level information, you can think about balancing your investments in different types of things, right? Stocks, they are usually company shares that you're going to buy, those shares, and they're either going to pay you a dividend or you're going to be able to sell them later. They have a very nice return potentially, but the market risk is there. You may buy bonds, which are the source of bonds is usually you loaned money to somebody and they are paying you back. A little bit less risk, but they are threatened by potentially rise in interest rates. As a minor side note, this is what did Silicon Valley Bank in more than anything else. We can talk about that if we have time. Real estate, of course, is another category. You can buy properties for rentals or for gains. Market risks abound, external costs abound. Cash is phenomenal, right? Very high liquidity. The problem with cash is that it has very low interest, very low returns, and it's threatened by inflation. If there's one thing that I hope people understand is that just taking your money, parking it putting the money in your blanket is fine, but you are losing to inflation, which has been a factor in North America, at least recently. Other alternatives, venture capital, art, digital goods. I refuse to call crypto, right? But challenge here is that they are very opaque. This is the type of investment that you may be able to do. The other thing that's interesting to understand is where do you make those investments? And this is where sometimes people start getting confused. What type of investment accounts exist? You're going to open an account. And I put Canada and the US. There's different types of accounts for different types of purposes. If a regular investment account where there's very few restrictions, is in Canada, we call them cash or non-registered accounts. In the US, you call them taxable brokerage accounts. This is just buying and selling stocks or bonds or what have you. Usually for retirement savings, here in Canada, we have RRSPs, Registered Retirement Savings Plans. In the US, you have the 401ks and the IRAs, and the investment retirement accounts, I believe. And you have two types, the traditional IRAs and the Roth IRAs. You can refer to the slides later. What's interesting is that sometimes, especially for retirement, your company may have they may offer you a match. If you put up to 10% of your salary, we will put up to 5 or something. The hint is it's free money. Take it if you can. We do education savings in what's called RESPs, Registered Education Savings Plans. You have the 529s in the US. And for other investments, we have something called the TFSAs, tax-free saving accounts. Roth IRAs in the US may be an example, but not quite. Just wrapping up our time here. So we talked about the types of investments that exist. We talked about the types of accounts that exist. I do want to talk about the types of gains. And again, these are the things that I didn't know when I was getting started, right? And death and taxes. The income that you get from the return that you get from your investments is not the same. One thing is not like the others. You may have heard of capital gains. Well, capital gains is the difference, is what you get from buying something for a low price and selling it for high. Different countries will do taxation slightly different. Here in Canada, if I buy something for 1,000 and I sell something for 5,000, I made a capital gain of 4,000. Out of that 4,000, 2,000, the rule is that 2,000 of those dollars are going to be taxed at my regular income tax rate. That's the tax I pay. In the US, it's a little bit different. You consider it if it's a short term, less than a year. If that transaction happening less than a year, then it's a short term. If it's a longer term, then you get better tax rates. Our regular income, the income we get from our salaries, right? That in both countries, it's taxed at the marginal, at the regular rates. Dividends, on the other hand, are the regular payouts that you get from holding company shares, and those are taxed differently. Here in Canada, we are taxed at marginal rates. So, for example, if I get $50 on a month or on a quarter in terms of dividends, I will be paying as if those $50 were regular income, but there may be some tax credits applying here. In the US, you also have similar negotiations around which one, if it's a qualified, you pay a lower rate and so on. And then just the last type there is return of capital. Sometimes the way that the company pays you back is defining something as return of capital. So let's say that I bought something for 1,000 and they pay me back 100 saying, oh, this is $100, but it's return of capital. Fine. I'm not taxed on that $100, but then it means that my adjusted cost base, it moves from 1,000 to 900. Anyway, that's the discussing the point about different types of gains. The one point I like to make is understand the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. Tax avoidance is everything that you do to organize your affairs so that you're paying as little tax as possible. Tax evasion is crossing the line into doing stupid, illegal stuff. Don't do the latter. Just as we are closing thoughts in terms of personal finance. Lessons that I learned the hard way. Money is not the be all and end all, right? Health, family, etc. is critical, but money does help, right? And it is important. And in a society that we live, you do need it, period. So keep that in mind. The idea of paying yourself first. So in other words, as you're doing your investment, before you start splurging on something new, make sure that you're investing for the longer term. Make sure you're saving for your retirement. Make sure you're saving for a savings goal. Make sure you have a safety cushion to handle expenses that you may or may not plan for before you start splurging it away. I've been guilty of suffering lifestyle inflation. You start buying nicer things, and that is a snowball. Beware bad debt. So if you're going to borrow money, make sure that that you know why you're borrowing it. It's one thing to borrow money for your mortgage, or buying something for education versus buying something just for consumption. I want to buy. I'm taking out money because I want to go on a big trip just because I want to. It's a balance, right? But to try to avoid that. Becoming a lifelong learner is a general advice, but there's so much more to learn about investing. It's not even funny. The point is, no one, and I mean no one, is going to care about or understand your situation as much as you yourself do. And whenever you're in doubt, please hire a professional, licensed professional, especially for stuff like your taxes. Just be aware of something called the principal agent problem, right? Are they really acting on your behalf, or are they acting on their behalf? With that in mind, I do want to thank you again for the opportunity. I know this talk is a little bit different than what we were expecting from PancakesCon. Thank you so much for the opportunity. You can find me. I can answer questions here if we have any live. If not, on Slack. If not, we go on Mastodon. And on the topic of Mastodon, a shout out to Jerry for running infosec.exchange. It's a phenomenal community that he helped lead there as well. So with that, thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you're enjoying the conference.